from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up today on AgDay, an escalating trade dispute gains momentum, but are we officially in a trade war?
We're as close to a trade war as we have been in a decade.
How are rising tensions around trade impacting the price of equipment? Machinery Pete weighs in. As wheat prices struggle, farmers on the East Coast are gaining an appetite for barley.
There are wheat growers that were strictly wheat growers growing barley this year.
That's as growers try to quench a growing thirst. And work in Wisconsin that tries to develop an appetite in Japan for U.S. dairy from a young age.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Don't forget, technically, both countries have just proposed tariffs. There's been nothing enacted, and I think that's an important point.
New senior White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow dismissing the notion that a trade war is inevitable, calling this a delicate, broad-based negotiation. Good morning, I'm Tyne Morgan. Clinton Griffiths is off today. Well, perhaps it's a matter of semantics, but is this economic dispute between the United States and China a trade war? Well, there's no shortage of opinions. Both U.S. and Chinese leadership say the escalating trade dispute has not reached the level of a war. President Donald Trump tweeting late last week that, quote, "We are not in a trade war with China, and that now we have a trade deficit of $500 billion a year with intellectual property theft of another $300 billion. We cannot let this continue." Now, similar sentiments from a Chinese political analyst who says the brewing threats do not signify a full-blown trade war. He compared it to playing cards, saying, quote, "Both sides are keeping their true price close to their chest and are competing and bargaining," end quote. Well, regardless, the tough tariff talk has raised concerns in many agricultural sectors. But do ag economists agree that we're not in the midst of a trade war yet? Here's Betsy Gibbon.
Tyne, farm groups are saying this is a trade war, but when it comes to economists, viewpoints are split on what some are calling this game of high-stakes poker.
I would liken it to someone playing a high-stakes poker game, and they have 4 sixes, and they're trying to convince the person on the other side of the table that they have a full house.
It may be a matter of who will fold first during a game of high-stakes poker. But the question remains, is the U.S. officially in a trade war?
If we get to the middle of May and we've got no resolution on this, then we're going to be calling it a trade war. But we've got time. Especially when it comes to the threat of tariffs on ag products.
I would call it a trade war to a great extent. There are still casualties as a process, and the soybean farmer would be one example. And so from that standpoint, I consider it, in essence, a trade war.
And farmers are pinned in the middle.
5 years down the road, if they're still there, it's going to hurt not only the soybean market, it's going to hurt livestock, it's going to hurt financial side.
The U.S. is trying to protect its intellectual property and close the gap on a trade deficit. However, Suderman says that deficit is why he believes China could run out of products to threaten tariffs on as well.
But we have a $500 billion trade deficit with China. That means that we buy a lot more from them than what they buy from us.
Suderman says China does not publicly want to be embarrassed. President Trump may need to give China a way to give in, yet save face.
A lot of give can be done in the negotiations, but in the message that has come out publicly, it'll be stated somewhat different in order to allow the other side to have a safe face in the process.
Strategies both countries are taking to protect their entities. Reporting for AgDay, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Now, wheat is another crop China is targeting in its list of 106 products on which it wants to place a tariff. But it's more than just trade causing pain for wheat growers right now. It's also the poor condition of this year's crop due to unrelenting drought. Now, USDA will release updated crop condition ratings today, but last week, USDA showed Oklahoma wheat was in the worst shape with only 9% rated good, and none was in the excellent category. Oklahoma State wheat specialist Kim Anderson says if rains soaked the state today, it would be enough to save some of the crop, but not all of it.
Right now, you've got producers, especially in western Oklahoma and the Panhandle, that hope we don't get rain so that they can insure this out and come in with the summer crop. But however, if they get rain, they're going to get enough yield so that they won't be able to till it under and come in with the summer crop and receive an insurance payment. So yeah, there's time to save the crop. That wheat is a weed, but what I'm hearing on the street, and there's certain areas that weed's almost dead.
Well, USDA's latest planting intentions report shows barley acres are declining this year, down 8% from 2018. While some farmers in states like North Dakota and Oregon are opting out of growing as much barley, it's areas like Delaware and Virginia that are picking up the slack, seeing a 25 to 33% increase in acres. And it's a growing thirst for more barley that's eating into wheat acres for farmers in Delmarva.
It's a craze that's gaining traction around the country.
We're proximity malt, which means we are trying to be in close proximity to both the barley and the brewers.
Matt Musial says Laurel, Delaware is perfectly placed to capitalize on both of those. Setting in the mid-Atlantic region, the area is close to major cities like Baltimore and Washington, D.C., but it's also surrounded by barley.
A big driver for our business in building this brand new facility is that craft beer is growing in popularity, and with craft beer growing in popularity, that craft beer uses more malt per barrel, so there's more demand for malt.
The converted grain facility is now thirsting for barley.
Here in the Mid-Atlantic, to support this facility, we'll need somewhere between 10 and 15,000 acres of barley being grown, depending on yields, obviously, to support an annual production here of 25,000 metric tons.
It's creating new demand in an area that typically grows wheat.
The wheat growers are looking for diversification. Double cropping, whether it be barley or wheat with soybeans, is a very good crop for this area.
Schiff says for farmers in this area, it's all about being able to grow two crops in a single year.
You cannot single crop barley or wheat. You just cannot generate enough money with a single crop. So we are able to double crop. I think that is the key.
But it's a chance growers aren't willing to take unless they know demand is waiting.
Growers won't put it in the ground until they have a contract that they know where they can take it.
Musial says currently the demand is much larger than supply.
One batch of malt in this vessel is 200 metric tons. That's approximately 9,500 bushels, or the way that I like to explain it to people is when you see a grain truck driving down the road, it's about 10 of those trucks driving down the road, makes up one batch.
Today, not even half of that need is contracted out in acres.
We'll produce not only kilned malts, but roasted malts. So all those things that make your craft beer lots of flavor and color, we'll also be able to produce here.
According to the Brewers Association, the craft brewery industry has witnessed a demand boom over the past decade. In 2009, the U.S. was home to nearly 1,600 craft breweries, and by 2016, that number had jumped to 5,234. Despite the trend, some Delmarva farmers are reluctant to make the switch.
It's just a fear factor. What they don't want to do is grow something and find that the buyer has disappeared. That is a major fear in a tight economy. So there's a little bit of that, a slow transition.
He says while malt barley is now a viable option to growers once dependent on wheat, the full economic impact still needs to be distilled.
To expect it to do something much different than all the other crops is going to be a lot to expect. I do think it's going to be a good option for a while.
Let's get a quick glance at weather this Monday morning. Say hello to Mike Hoffman. Mike.
Good morning, Ty. A Michigan farmer posted some comments on AgWeb. He says sugar beets have been planted in the Saginaw Valley the past couple of weeks as weather permitted. And from eastern Illinois, a farmer in Coles County says he hopes the weather will settle down soon. They have frozen lakes in their fields, so planting will be way behind. And taking a look at the estimated rain from last week, you can see the majority of it fell across the area in I-70 from St. Louis to Pittsburgh. Now, that was mostly snow that melted, but that's how much moisture they ended up with. Some areas 2 to 3 inches of moisture from that melted snow. We'll check your forecast coming up, but first, here are some hometown temps.
Ever wake up wondering what does today's weather have in store? Well, with weather updates, it delivers the local forecast right to your cell phone each morning to make preparing for the day easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
Still to come, I talk with Purdue economist Jim Mintert about the importance of trade to the U.S. protein sector. And Machinery Pete even weighs in on the tariff talk.
Did proposed Chinese tariffs to U.S. soybeans have any effect on used equipment values last week? Stay tuned, we'll talk about it.
Ketchup.
With a uniquely powerful formulation of proven ingredients, Resicor corn herbicide gives you extraordinary power.
Who wants dessert?
At least when it comes to weeds.
In agribusiness, both pork and beef posted another strong month for exports in February. United States Meat Export Federation says pork exports in February were up 4% in volume and 12% in value. And beef exports seen double-digit gains, jumping 11% in volume and up 18% in value. Now, when looking at the importance of trade, USMEF says pork exports in February accounted for nearly 28% of pork production and nearly 14% of beef production.
Here now with Jim Mintert of Purdue University. Jim, we've been talking about this uncertainty about trade. I mean, it's making headlines, not only in ag media, but also mainstream media. But when you look at the protein sector, just at the beet sector, how vital is trade to them?
It's very important. You know, going back in the mid-1980s when trade in the meats just started to take off, we were exporting less than 2% of U.S. production, and that's across beef, pork, and poultry. Today, it's about 16 to 17% of U.S. production, so it's become a very, very important source of demand. We used to be almost entirely domestically focused. Now, if you think about it from a long-run perspective, all the growth opportunities are really in the export channels. So maintaining open access to those international markets is tremendously important to the meats.
Have we seen any export partner grow tremendously? I mean, let's not look at just China. Let's look at some of these other countries where we've seen them really up their purchases of U.S. meat products.
Well, over the last 25 years, we've had increased trade with the NAFTA countries, especially Mexico. So they've been a larger consumer over that time frame, and it's been a big beneficiary to the meats. From a longer term perspective, and actually looking ahead, Southeast Asia is a tremendous growth market. As those income levels come up, people want to improve their diets. And when people want to improve their diets around the world, that almost always means increasing animal protein in their diet. So the question mark for the U.S. is probably not so much can we see exports grow to some of those countries, but which products are they going to prefer? And if you look at the more recent data, the two commodities are probably going to be the most likely beneficiaries are, first of all, poultry, and then second, pork. And if you look over the last 3 decades, the big beneficiary in the U.S. In terms of the magnitude of change has been on the pork side. Pork exports have grown 52-fold in a little over 3 decades. An amazing success story. Pork exports were trivial in the mid-'80s, now in the ballpark of 20% of U.S. production.
Wow, all right. And how much of that goes to China?
China in 2017 took about 7% by volume of our pork exports. Hong Kong took another 3%, and some of that gets transshipped, so between 7 and 10%, which is significant.
Yeah, definitely significant. All right, Jim, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We need to take a quick break, and then we'll have a check of weather here on Ag Day.
Ag Day, brought to you by new Delaro fungicide for corn and soybeans. Achieve personal best yields.
Welcome back. Time now to check weather. Mike, I see you have the jet stream up. What is the major weather maker you're watching this week?
Well, we've been watching the big rotation, the big cutoff low in the Hudson Bay area. That's weakening, so that may change the pattern as we head through the next couple of weeks. And that thing has been sending shots of cold air into the northern parts of the country, and occasionally that's been going into the southeast, but you folks have been warming back up again. Farther north, not so much. It's been cold pretty much the whole time for the past couple of weeks. Northern Plains, Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, Northeast. But as this whole thing weakens as we head through the end of the week and into next weekend, you can kind of see it goes a little bit farther north. We have now southern stream activity. That will bring a pretty big storm by next weekend into the middle of the country. So keep that in mind. That will move on through the Great Lakes and into the Northeast as we head into the following week. But it's a little more of a zonal flow here, which will warm things up a little bit. Still, I'm going to go below normal for this week for the northern tier of states. As you can see there, above normal, southern Colorado all the way down into Mexico over into Louisiana. As far as precipitation for this coming week, you'll notice I'm not going above normal in the northern plains. This is through Friday, but next weekend I think it's going to be very wet. into this area, but it's normal through Friday. Above normal then you can see for much of the southern tier of states, above normal Pacific Northwest, Northern Rockies. 30-day outlook for temperatures going below normal basically from the Ohio Valley northward back to Montana all the way through Canada. Above normal for South Florida, much of southern western Texas through the Four Corner region and the Southwest. Precipitation over the next 30 days above normal from northern Georgia, Alabama all the way through New England. Below normal for Florida, most of the Southwest as well, and above normal for the Northern Rockies and much of the West Coast. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. First of all, for Great Falls, Montana, partly sunny, rather mild today, high of 53 degrees. Monroe, Louisiana, mostly cloudy and warmer, high of 72. And finally, Trenton, New Jersey, cloudy and remaining on the chilly side, high temperature around 46 degrees.
Still to come, the concern over a possible tariff on soybeans pushed down prices last week, but has it impacted the price of machinery? Machinery Pete weighs in. Well, the tariff talk has consumed agriculture and mainstream media the past month, but it seems like nervousness is escalating in farm country. So are trade concerns impacting the price of farm machinery? Here's Machinery Pete.
Well, folks, last Wednesday, when the proposed Chinese tariffs to U.S. soybeans, when that news broke, I really wondered what effect there could be on used equipment values, which have been very strong since November. Now, again, that was last Wednesday, and the answer came immediately on a pair of farm auctions last Wednesday in North Dakota. Now, here's a picture of a 2008 Case H 2588 combine, 1,635 engine hours on it, sold for $95,000. And folks, that is the highest auction price I've seen on a 2588 sold without a head in the last 27 months. Again, that was Northeast North Dakota last Wednesday. Now, same auction, this 2008 New Holland T9030 four-wheel drive, 1,541 hours on it, sold for $125,000. And that is a new record high auction sale price on a T9030 in the U.S. Now, same day, last Wednesday, down in South Central North Dakota, this 2011 Challenger MT765C, it's only 594 hours on it, sold for $147,500. That's the second highest auction price I've ever seen on an MT765C. And again, that same auction, this 2008 Bobcat S330 skid steer with 1,953 hours on it, sold for $32,000. And same deal here, second highest auction price I've ever seen on that model. So at least last Wednesday, on these pair of North Dakota auctions, used equipment values, good condition, holding very strong.
Thanks, Pete. Next, developing international relations in a Wisconsin dairy barn. In the Country is next.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit KubotaUSA.com today.
While the U.S. is embattled in trade negotiations with China, a foreign exchange program gives college students from Japan a taste of Wisconsin's signature industry. Details in this video provided by the Wisconsin Milk Marketing Board.
Dairy farmer Louisa Peterson recently showed a group of future educators from Japan how her family's dairy farm produces high-quality milk.
The milk goes through here.
The tour came about because of a relationship with UW-La Crosse and its sister school, University of Teacher Education Fukuoka in Japan.
All of our students are education majors, and they study about U.S. education system, visiting schools, visiting classes.
When one of the host families contacted Louisa about opening up her farm for a tour, she saw it as a unique educational opportunity for the visiting students.
This group in particular, because they're going to go back and be teachers on their own, they have a chance to talk to people about agriculture and foreign agriculture and kind of what their experience was, their firsthand experience was.
We were just thrilled to death to be invited here today to be able to experience a true blue American farm, see the cows, meet a real farmer, and actually interact with the animals.
The students were impressed and grateful for the opportunity to visit a Wisconsin dairy farm and meet a dairy farmer.
Yeah, we learned how farmers work hard and like you milk 3 times in days. I was really surprised at that. So I can tell the student how big is the USA farm is.
Students were equally thrilled to have the chance to taste some of the products that are made from cow's milk.
Very nice. Yeah, we love cheese. Like,
yes.
cheese and milk and butter. So healthy.
And that's Wisconsin Dairy News.
The Japanese students were here for 3 weeks and studied American education methods from kindergarten all the way through college. Well, that's all the time we have this Monday morning. We're glad you tuned in. For all of us at AgDay, I'm Tyne Morgan. Have a great week in farm country.